Somewhere in your childhood, a door slammed. Not a physical door, but an emotional one. In that moment, your INFJ soul made a choice that would shape everything about how you love, how you hurt, and how you survive. You were just a child who felt everything, who noticed the tension in voices before words were even spoken, who absorbed emotions like a sponge absorbs water. And then something happened. Maybe your tears were met with impatience. Maybe your sensitivity was called weakness. Maybe you watched the adults around you and realized that feeling deeply wasn't safe in this world. That's when the door slammed. That's when your young mind faced an impossible choice. Build a wall to protect yourself, or become a radar to anticipate danger. Hide your heart, or expose it completely to keep others happy. Most people think INFJ-A and INFJ-T are about confidence versus anxiety. But that surface explanation misses the real story entirely. What if I told you they're actually two completely different trauma responses? Two survival strategies that formed the moment a sensitive child realized the world wasn't safe for people like them. Before we start, please hit the like button, comment, and subscribe so you won't miss any of our weekly deep dives into the world of personality types. And if you're looking for a deeper understanding of yourself and your INFJ personality, browse our favorite INFJ products in the description, and click the link in the comments to take our favorite free personality test. The childhood split, when INFJs learn to survive. Every INFJ starts the same way, as a child who feels everything, who notices the tension in their parents' voices before anyone else does, who can sense when someone's lying, when someone's hurt, when the emotional temperature of a room shifts even slightly. These children are born with what researchers call sensory processing sensitivity. Their nervous systems are wired to pick up on subtleties that others miss entirely. They're the kids who cry when movies get too intense, who need quiet time after social gatherings, who seem to absorb the emotions of everyone around them. But here's where the split begins. Somewhere in their early years, these sensitive children encounter a moment of profound invalidation. Maybe their parents tell them they're too sensitive when they cry at a commercial. Maybe classmates mock them for caring too much about a hurt animal. Maybe they express their deep feelings and get met with eye rolls or dismissal. This is the moment that changes everything. The moment when an INFJ child realizes their natural way of being isn't welcomed in this world. Now, neurologically speaking, childhood trauma doesn't just affect our emotions. It literally rewires our developing brains. When a sensitive child experiences repeated invalidation, their nervous system makes a crucial decision about how to survive. Some children decide the problem is that they're showing too much. They learn to hide their feelings, to appear strong and unaffected. They develop what psychologists call an avoidant attachment style. These children become INFJ-A adults. Other children decide the problem is that they're not paying close enough attention. They become hyper-vigilant, constantly scanning for emotional danger. They develop what we call an anxious attachment style. These children become INFJ-T adults. Both responses are brilliant survival strategies. Both are attempts to protect a sensitive soul in a world that punishes sensitivity. The family dynamics play a huge role in determining which path an INFJ takes. In families where emotions are seen as weakness, where crying is met with irritation, where sensitivity is constantly criticized, INFJ children often learn to shut down their emotional expression. They become the strong ones, the reliable ones, the ones who never need anything from anyone. In families where emotions are chaotic or unpredictable, where the child becomes responsible for managing everyone else's feelings, where love feels conditional on being perfect, INFJ children often become emotional radar systems. They learn to anticipate problems, to read every micro-expression, to make themselves indispensable through their empathy. Here's what most people get wrong about this split. They assume INFJ-A means healthier. They think these INFJs figured out how to be confident, while INFJ-T types are still struggling with anxiety. But that's not what's happening at all. Both INFJ-A and INFJ-T are trauma responses. Both are ways that sensitive children learned to survive in environments that couldn't hold their emotional depth. Neither is healthier than the other. They're just different strategies for protecting the same vulnerable core. The INFJ-A learned to survive by becoming emotionally self-sufficient. They built walls so high that even they sometimes forget what's behind them. The INFJ-T learned to survive by becoming emotionally indispensable. They made themselves so attuned to others' needs that their own needs became invisible. Both strategies worked in childhood. Both kept these sensitive souls safe when they were most vulnerable. But as adults, both strategies come with profound costs that most INFJs don't even recognize. Think about your own childhood for a moment. Can you remember the first time you realized your sensitivity wasn't welcome? Can you feel which direction your young mind decided to go? Did you learn to hide your feelings or amplify them? Did you become the strong one or the caring one? That moment of recognition might be the key to understanding which trauma response has been shaping your adult life. But before you can identify your own response, you have to understand the genetic trigger that makes INFJs vulnerable to this split in the first place. Most people miss this next detail, but it changes everything about how you view your childhood. Now, you might think the INFJ-A path is the quote-unquote healthier one because it looks like confidence. But this next part is where things get interesting, because that confidence is actually hiding a biological shutdown that most INFJ-As don't even know is happening. The INFJ-A, the Stoic Shield trauma response. Let's talk about the INFJ-A, the one everyone thinks has it figured out, the one who seems confident, self-assured, almost untouchable. But what you're seeing isn't natural confidence. What you're seeing is emotional armor that was forged in childhood and has been polished to perfection over decades. The INFJ-A learned early that showing vulnerability was dangerous. Maybe their tears were met with impatience. Maybe their emotional needs were seen as burdens. Maybe they watched other family members fall apart and decided someone had to be the stable one. So they built what I call the Stoic Shield. This shield looks like confidence from the outside. INFJAs seem secure in themselves. They don't chase people for validation. They don't panic when someone doesn't text back immediately. They appear emotionally self-sufficient, like they don't need anyone or anything. But here's the truth most people miss. This isn't confidence. It's disconnection. The INFJ-A learned to survive by cutting themselves off from their own emotional needs. They developed what psychologists call emotional numbing as a protective mechanism. Think about it this way. When you're a sensitive child and every time you express a feeling you get hurt, what do? You stop expressing feelings. But it goes deeper than that. You eventually stop feeling them altogether, at least consciously. The emotions are still there, buried beneath layers of self-protection, but they become inaccessible even to you. This is why INFJs often struggle with what therapists call alexithymia, the inability to identify and describe emotions. Not because they don't have emotions, but because they learned so early to disconnect from them that the neural pathways became dormant. The INFJ-A becomes the family stabilizer, the friend everyone can count on, the one who never needs anything in return. They overfunction in every relationship. They become the emotional rock while everyone else gets to fall apart around them. But this comes with a devastating cost. The INFJ-A often loses touch with their own needs entirely. They don't know what they want because they learned that wanting things was dangerous. They don't know how they feel because they learned that feelings were inconvenient. They develop what I call the "I don't need anyone" mask. And they wear it so consistently that they forget it's a mask at all. They genuinely believe they're self-sufficient. They pride themselves on their independence. But underneath, there's often a profound loneliness that they can't even name. The hidden anxiety beneath their composed exterior is real, but it manifests differently than INFJ-T anxiety. Instead of worrying about what others think, INFJ-Ts often experience existential anxiety, a deep sense that something is missing, that they're going through the motions of life without really living it. They might feel disconnected from their own experiences, like they're watching their life happen rather than participating in it. This is what trauma therapists call dissociation. It's not pathological. It's not a disorder. It's a brilliant survival strategy that protected them when they needed protection most. But as adults, this emotional armor becomes a prison. INFJs often find themselves in relationships where they give and give but never receive. They attract people who need fixing because that's the only way they know how to connect. They become indispensable through their strength, rather than lovable for who they are. The tragedy is that INFJs often don't even realize they're struggling. Their coping mechanism is so effective that they convince themselves they're fine. They look at INFJ-Ts and think, at least I'm not that anxious. But they don't recognize that their apparent calm is actually emotional shutdown. If you're an INFJ-A, you might be reading this and feeling resistant. You might be thinking, but I am confident. I don't need constant reassurance like other people. And you're right. You don't need those things because you learned not to need them. But learning not to need and genuinely not needing are two very different things. The INFJ's journey isn't about becoming more emotional or more needy. It's about slowly, safely, reconnecting with the parts of themselves they had to hide to survive. We've seen how the shield works, but what about those who chose to become the radar? Most people label this as anxiety, but as you're about to see, that label is a dangerous oversimplification of a survival superpower. The INFJ-T, the Hyper-Vigilant Sensor Trauma Response. Now let's talk about the INFJ-T, the one everyone thinks is the anxious type, the one who seems to worry about everything, who second-guesses themselves constantly, who appears fragile and overwhelmed. But what you're seeing isn't weakness. What you're seeing is a trauma response that turned sensitivity into a survival superpower. The INFJ-T learned early that danger could come from anywhere at any time. Maybe their family was emotionally chaotic, with moods that shifted without warning. Maybe love felt conditional, dependent on being perfect or anticipating everyone's needs. Maybe they watched someone they loved get hurt and decided they would never be caught off guard again. So they developed what I call hyper-vigilant sensing. Their nervous system became a finely tuned radar system, constantly scanning for emotional threats. Every micro-expression gets analyzed. Every tone of voice gets dissected. Every silence gets interpreted as potential rejection. This isn't anxiety in the clinical sense. This is adaptive hypervigilance. The INFJ-T's brain learned to process emotional information at lightning speed because their survival depended on it. They became emotional early warning systems, able to detect problems before anyone else even knew they existed. But here's what most people don't understand about INFJ-Ts. Their sensitivity isn't a bug. It's a feature. They didn't become anxious because they're weak. They became hyper-aware because they're incredibly strong. It takes tremendous mental and emotional resources to constantly monitor the emotional temperature of everyone around you. The INFJ-T absorbed others' emotions as a protection mechanism. If they could feel what everyone else was feeling, they could prevent emotional explosions before they happened. If they could anticipate needs, they could avoid abandonment. If they could be perfect, they could avoid criticism. This is why INFJ-Ts often struggle with perfectionism. Not because they naturally have high standards, but because they learned that making mistakes felt dangerous. Every error became evidence that they might lose love, approval, or safety. They become what I call emotional sponges. They soak up the feelings of everyone around them, often without realizing they're doing it. They walk into a room and immediately know who's upset, who's hiding something, who needs comfort. But they rarely know what they themselves are feeling, because their emotional bandwidth is completely occupied by everyone else. The exhaustion INFJTs experience isn't just from caring too much. It's from running a sophisticated emotional monitoring system 24 hours a day. Imagine having a job where you're responsible for tracking the emotional state of every person in your environment. That's what the INFJT's nervous system is doing constantly. Their perfectionism extends beyond just avoiding mistakes. They become masters at reading what others need and morphing themselves to provide it. They become the friend who always knows the right thing to say, the partner who anticipates needs before they're expressed, the family member who keeps everyone happy. But this hypervigilance comes with profound costs. INFJTs often lose themselves in the process of monitoring everyone else. They become so good at feeling other people's emotions that they forget how to feel their own. They become so focused on preventing abandonment that they abandon themselves. The constant emotional scanning is exhausting. INFJTs often feel drained after social interactions, not because they're introverted, but because they've been working overtime to ensure everyone's emotional safety. They need recovery time not from people, but from the intense emotional labor they perform around people. Their sensitivity became both their superpower and their burden. They can offer comfort and understanding that most people can't even imagine. They can see through facades and connect with people's deepest truths. But they also carry the weight of everyone's unspoken pain. The INFJT often feels responsible for everyone's emotional well-being, while feeling completely alone in their own struggles. They give and give until they're empty, then wonder why no one seems to notice when they're the ones who need support. If you're an INFJT, you might recognize this pattern of emotional overwhelm followed by guilty withdrawal. You care so much it hurts, then feel bad about needing space to recover. Now, everything I have just told you about these two types will not work if you don't know this next secret. There is a single, haunting connection between the shield and the radar that explains why INFJs often feel like they're living a double life. The hidden connection, why both types mirror each other. Here's what most people miss about INFJ-A and INFJ-T types. They're not opposites. They're two sides of the same wounded coin. Both are responses to the same core trauma, the trauma of being a deeply sensitive soul in a world that doesn't know how to hold that sensitivity safely. Look beneath the surface and you'll see the mirror. The INFJ-A, who seems so confident and self-sufficient, is actually terrified of being vulnerable again. The INFJ-T, who seems so anxious and needy, is actually terrified of being abandoned again. Both fears stem from the same childhood wound, the wound of having their authentic self rejected. Both types struggle with authentic connection, just in opposite ways. The INFJ-A connects by being useful, by being the strong one everyone can lean on. But they never let anyone see their real struggles, their real needs, their real fears. They're intimately connected to others' pain, but completely disconnected from their own. The INFJ-T connects by being emotionally available, by feeling everything so deeply that others feel understood. But they're so busy managing everyone else's emotions that they lose track of their own authentic desires and boundaries. They're intimately connected to others' needs, but completely disconnected from their own. Both types sacrifice parts of themselves for others' comfort. The INFJ-A sacrifices their emotional needs to avoid being seen as weak or needy. The INFJ-T sacrifices their personal boundaries to avoid being seen as selfish or uncaring. Both learned that their authentic self was somehow too much for the world to handle. The shared core fear runs deeper than most people realize. It's not just fear of rejection. It's fear of being truly seen and found lacking. The INFJ-A thinks, if people knew how much I actually need, they'd leave. The INFJ-T thinks, if people knew how overwhelming I find their emotions, they'd leave. Both are convinced that their true nature would drive people away. This is why both types often feel profoundly lonely, even when surrounded by people who care about them. The INFJ-A feels lonely because no one knows their real struggles. They've become so good at appearing strong that people assume they don't need support. The INFJ-T feels lonely because no one sees past their emotional availability to their own need for care. Both types become masters at reading others while remaining mysteries to themselves. The INFJ-A knows exactly what everyone else needs but has forgotten what they themselves want. The INFJ-T knows exactly how everyone else feels but has lost touch with their own authentic emotions beneath all the absorbed feelings from others. The tragedy is that both types are doing exactly what they learned to do to survive. The INFJ-A learned that being needed was safer than needing. The INFJ-T learned that being sensitive to others was safer than being sensitive to themselves. Both strategies worked in childhood, but they're prison cells in adulthood. Here's the beautiful irony. What each type is desperately trying to avoid, they're actually creating. The INFJ-A's emotional walls don't protect them from abandonment. They guarantee it. People can't connect with someone who won't let them in. The INFJ-T's hypervigilance doesn't protect them from rejection. It creates the very overwhelm that makes others pull away. Both types are running from the same thing: the terror of being authentically themselves and having that not be enough. But they're running in opposite directions, which is why they often don't recognize themselves in each other. The INFJ-A looks at the INFJ-T and thinks, why can't they just be stronger? The INFJ-T looks at the INFJ-A and thinks, why can't they just be more open? Neither realizes they're looking at their own shadow, the parts of themselves they had to reject to survive. Understanding your trauma is the first step, but it's useless without the integration key. This next part is where we move from surviving to actually thriving, and it starts with a question most INFJs are terrified to ask themselves. The path forward, integrating both sides. The healing journey for both INFJ types isn't about becoming something different. It's about reclaiming the parts of themselves they had to abandon for safety. It's about integration, not transformation. For INFJs, the path forward means slowly, safely reconnecting with their buried emotions. This doesn't mean becoming weak or needy. It means recognizing that having needs doesn't make you a burden. It means learning to trust that the right people won't leave when you show them your real struggles. Start small. Notice when you automatically say, "I'm fine," when you're not. Practice sharing one small struggle with someone you trust. Let someone help you with something, even if you could do it yourself. These tiny acts of vulnerability are how you rebuild the bridge to your own emotional world. For INFJTs, the path forward means learning to create healthy boundaries without losing their natural empathy. This doesn't mean becoming cold or selfish. It means recognizing that you can't pour from an empty cup. It means understanding that taking care of yourself isn't taking away from others. Start by practicing emotional differentiation. When you feel overwhelmed, ask yourself, is this my feeling or someone else's? Learn to say, I care about you and I need some space to recharge. These aren't acts of selfishness. They're acts of self-preservation that actually make you more available for authentic connection. The integrated INFJ is someone who honors both their strength and their sensitivity. Someone who can be there for others without losing themselves in the process. Someone who can be vulnerable without drowning in their emotions. Someone who understands that their sensitivity isn't a flaw to be managed, but a gift to be treasured. This integration doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process of reclaiming the parts of yourself you learned to hide or suppress. It's about finding the middle ground between the INFJ's emotional armor and the INFJT's emotional overwhelm. The goal isn't to become fearless. It's to become whole. To hold both your need for connection and your need for autonomy. To honor both your desire to help others and your responsibility to care for yourself. Remember, both trauma responses served you when you needed them most. Honor them, thank them, and then gently begin the work of becoming who you were before the world taught you that your authentic self wasn't safe. Both INFJ-A and INFJ-T are valid responses to an invalidating world. Neither is broken. Neither needs to be fixed. Both are brilliant adaptations that protected sensitive souls when protection was needed most. Your trauma response isn't your identity. It's just the armor you wore to survive childhood. And now, as an adult, you get to choose which parts of that armor still serve you, and which parts are ready to come off. Healing doesn't mean changing your core nature. You'll always be sensitive. You'll always feel deeply. You'll always notice what others miss. The goal isn't to become someone else. It's to become yourself without the protective strategies that no longer serve you. If this resonated with you, please subscribe and click the link in the comments to take our favorite free personality test. Remember, you're not too much or too little. You're exactly what this world needs. If you want to continue the journey to understanding yourself or an INFJ in your life, click either of the following videos where we continue to unlock the secrets of the INFJ personality type.